coming to you from the My Little Falls studio here in beautiful Little Falls, New York. It's your host, Scott Kinville, and another episode of Marty's Illegal Stick.
Hey, what's up, hockey fans, and welcome to episode number 32 of Marty's Illegal Stick, recorded here on June 30th, 2021. You know, as I often like to do every time we do these episode numbers, I like to bring up a couple of different players from the past. And 32 reminds me of two of my favorites. It's going to be Kelly Rudy and Jonathan Quick. And I do this a lot because we do have a listener. His name is Jeff Ferraro that loves this part. And I communicate with him just about every week. So we have this little thing going back and forth where he tells me his numbers. So Jeff, that's really for you too. Jonathan Quick and Kelly Rudy. So I know I'll let you guys know next week who he comes up with.
All right.
So anyways, we have got a great show lined up for you. This is a real treat we got. Before we bring our guest in, I'm going to bring our panel in. And making his return off the IL. He's missed the past couple of weeks due to undisclosed illness.
Yeah. He was coming home.
But he's back and he's ready to go. The Gumper, Leo Kinville. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Scott? I got through those couple of days of that heat, and the cold broke up, and I'm doing much better, and I'm glad to be here.
Did it break up because of the heat?
No, the medicine I took. Utica Club.
Yeah, well, whatever works, right?
Yeah, there you go.
And that's all over the counter, thank God, right?
Yeah,
and to my left, I got our producer and the man who I got a little story about him before we get going. So last Thursday down here in Little Falls, we had our first youth street hockey. We closed the street off here in Little Falls and put a couple nets out, and the kids came out. We had sticks and having a ball. Well, Dave, in his My Little Falls capacity, shows up to do some pictures for his My Little Falls. And we were busting chops about it before. I said, you're going to have to lay down and go and play goalie. Well,
you missed all this, Kevin. This was fun.
Yeah. So real fun.
Great.
So I'm playing goalie for the kids, right? I'm having a ball, right? They're little kids. I got no equipment on or anything like that. So Dave shows up and he's like, hey, he goes, how about if I take a shot on you?
That is not what happened, Scott. You wanted me to play goalie. We had this joke about,
you wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do it.
So I had to be the sport.
Yes.
Right. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, because Dave's always saying he knows nothing about hockey.
I know nothing about the
How
game.
hard is this going to be? Right. The man grabs a stick. And I don't know if it was like the spirit of Mario Lemieux just channeled into him. He whistles this wrist shot right by my ear. I didn't see it. I heard it.
Scott,
the net falls over because he hit the net so hard. And I'm like, oh, really? Somebody who knows nothing about hockey, Dave the Save Warner, is now Dave the Sandbag Warner. So,
gentlemen, I have said to Scott many times, I don't know the game. I don't follow it. But I've never said to him, I never played it. And that's the key thing. But for all of you, I just want to roll some tape so that we can show exactly what went on there. So here we go. I just wanted you to see how that day went for Scott. It wasn't just me. These little kids just tore him up.
See, this is why I am not a goalie.
Son, I got to tell you, you'll never be a Gumper.
No.
Boy, you'll be a red light.
That part of you definitely skipped over me. That's for sure. So
you see how prepared I was for this, right?
I bet you that very day you went home and edited that, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Hey, how'd it go, Sandbag?
Yeah. Thanks.
It was perfect.
Oh, boy.
Oh,
so now that he's done having his fun, I'm going to bring the rest of our panelists so we can get to our guest making his return as well. He's been out for the past couple of weeks. Various commitments lined up with, these things called jobs that we all have, right? Because somehow we got to pay the bills. Because, by the way, I don't pay anybody. So, but anyway, we're glad to have him back. The doctor of hockey, Dr. Keith Levatino. Keith, how are you?
I'm doing, guys. How's everyone?
I'm good. I'm good. Are you feeling better after Game 7?
Well, let's just say this. Last Friday night at 11 o'clock p.m., Major League Baseball season officially started for me. Go Mets.
Oh man, yeah, but you know you were a good sport about it.
I had all my orange and blue attire laid out for the coming week. You know, the superintendent walks in. We actually had Islander Day at school, believe it or not, at Benton Hall Academy. So I had all that colors. So I had to say I'm rooting for the Mets now because they're the same colors.
Well, let me ask you a question. How many of the kids asked if it was Edmonton Oiler Day?
None. They know better. Suspended. Out.
Well, I'm glad to see you're in good spirits, buddy. And there's always next season. As a Kings fan, I say that quite often. So
yeah.
Don't worry. I feel your pain.
Thank you.
And our last panelist coming to us from the Rink of Dreams. He's been away for a couple weeks too, but we're glad to have him back as well. Mr. Barry Shelley. Barry, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Great. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great. You're gonna have Dave come up next time you and Leo comes up to the rink. We need to get him in the cage.
Yeah, there you go.
After that video, I'm thinking the UFC cage.
Yeah. And I bolted down all the benches so no one will be throwing chairs and benches at him while he's on the ice. Okay?
Barry, you won't see a stick in my hand again, I guarantee you.
Well, this show is called Marty's Illegal Stick, so just about anything can happen, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and without further ado, I want to bring our guest in. This is, like I said, this guy is a legend in the hockey journalism world. He's got a total of 19 hockey-related books that he has written. He is also the editorial and education facilitator for the Hockey Hall of Fame and has done a ton of other things in his career that we're going to talk about. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Kevin Shea. Kevin, thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you, guys. You know, I love the fact that you guys are having so much fun. I hope I can contribute a little bit.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure of it.
Do you have any raw video we can use?
Well, funny you should mention. Barry, turn your head. No.
See, and it took you 5 seconds to blend right in. That's perfect. Oh, so how's it going? All right?
Doing really well, guys. How about you?
I'm good. And I saw your Facebook post the other day, and I just want to say my condolences on the passing of your stepfather.
I
It was
appreciate that very much.
sad.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
that's
tough times, but great memories, and that's what hockey's all about. But it's also what family's all about too. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Oh.
absolutely. So I guess we'll start digging in a little bit here. And I'll hit you with the softball, the soft question first here. So
Please.
How did it all get started?
Well, no, I've been a hockey fan since the day I was born. My dad was a big Maple Leafs fan. We grew up in Windsor, Ontario, just across the border from Detroit.
Okay.
And my dad was a big fan. My grandfather was a big fan. And so from the time I was born, we were sitting on the couch together watching Hockey Night in Canada and with my brother and my dad and I. And became Toronto Maple Leafs fans, which is funny because being a mile away from Detroit, we were not Red Wings fans whatsoever. I can only attest the fact that the Red Wings were not particularly good in the 1960s when I was a young boy. But secondly, the Red Wings blacked out Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday nights. So I couldn't watch the Leaf games if they were playing at home, trying to get more folks into the
Really?
Yeah. So I think we really resented the Red Wings back then. They were the dead things to us, and I was a Maple Leafs fan through and through, and it's just carried me through many years and lots of fun as well.
Wow, that's amazing too that they were able to do that because of with them being in the States and Hockey Night in Canada. You wouldn't think that they would have that kind of pull, but I guess things were a little bit different back then too.
Well, I mean, Hockey Night in Canada was on the Canadian channel, Channel 9 in our case, in Windsor, Ontario. And they had the broadcast rights for that territory. So so when they were playing at home on Saturday nights, they blacked out those Leaf games for us. So anyway, on we went. And the Leafs continued on, and the Red Wings got a whole lot better through the years. And and you were talking about the Kings. The Maple Leafs have left me wanting more times than you could ever imagine. So.
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel about it. Trust me. But Hockey Night in Canada is such a staple. I mean, we're in upstate New York. Actually, we're about the studio right here is about 25 miles from Utica, which is home of the Utica Comets. And so we were fortunate enough growing up to have a Canadian channel on our cable system. We had CKWS out of Kingston, Ontario.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, we were very fortunate in that regard. But what a great show, I tell you.
Oh, Hockey Night in Canada.
Yeah,
Boy, you had to be home Saturday night. You had to watch. That was a big deal.
And I'll tell you what, if you don't get pumped up when you hear that opening theme, you don't have a pulse.
It's so true. It's just, I use the word ubiquitous. I don't know where that came from even, but I mean, from the time that it was on the air, first of all, as a radio show, later on, it went on TV in 1952, but it was required viewing for, I'll say, Canadian boys, but a lot of Canadian girls too. And also, like yourselves, the runs in the border towns who could pick it up as well. So it really had huge ratings, still does very well, but not like back then when it was the only thing. You hurried home. If you were playing hockey, out on the street, you hurried back in and you had to watch the game. If you were playing on the ice, you finished your game and came home and watched it as well. It was what it was all about for all of us at that time anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was back in the days too, when you would only get like one hockey game a week on TV. Oh, now it's on every night. You can watch any game you want. I mean, it's just like I said, it's different things, times have changed, but I mean, there's still something very special about even mentioning Hockey Night in Canada. So
without question, I talked to so many players who grew up watching Hockey Night in Canada, and that impacted on them as well. I guess my story is pretty much the same as everybody else, but it was the only night of the week where we could have potato chips and ginger ale.
Yep, absolutely.
So my brother and I would sit on the couch and we had a salad bowl with some potato chips in it. We would eat the broken ones at the end of the first period. And, we had our whole routine all worked out. And we had our lucky glasses and we could hardly wait, not only just to watch hockey, but it gave us a chance to sit with Dad. And it also gave us a chance to have some treats. And we would beg to stay up and watch the three stars. And okay. And we would watch the 3 stars, but then had to scamper up to bed from there.
Yeah, because there was no such thing as looking it up on the internet the next day. So
I know, funny how that works back then. Jeez.
So from watching Hockey Night in Canada on the couch, you've gone on to, like I said, you wrote 19 hockey related books. And one thing I've always wondered about authors and books being written really is, on the average, about how long does it take from start to finish to finish a book?
So I would say usual books for me are a year. You have to remember that I've got a full-time job during the day, so it requires me coming home. I have dinner with my wife and we'll watch Jeopardy or something of that sort, and then I'm right down into my office researching, writing, whatever, and going from there. And I'm really diligent. I make sure it's every single night, weekends, 6-8 hours, and go from there. But it's such a passion. I love it so much, and that's my vice, I guess I would say. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't mess around. I research and write about hockey. So that's the way it goes. Some of the books took much longer. I wrote a book about the Centennial history of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that one basically had been writing it all my life, but it really was probably 3, 4, maybe even longer years of diligent work on putting that together. 100 years of history and tying in what was happening in the city, the province, the country, the world at that time as well, was a huge amount of work, but boy, it's so enjoyable as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That really is awesome. And there was actually 3 particular books I was going to ask you about. And I mean, I know there's an entire list we could go through, but I don't want to keep you here for 5 days. So,
oh, come on, please.
No, you got to get back to that full-time job. I understand.
Batteries run out. Yeah. The music will start playing soon here. If you keep going
the
like
gong
that.
show over here. I'll have the hook out pretty soon. Yeah, there we go. See.
Oh boy.
So speaking of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I wanted to ask you about Barolco, Without a Trace.
Yeah.
So that's actually, and just the preface with that, that's a story that not a lot of people down here in the States know about. And if you ask me, I wish the NHL would actually push its history a little bit more, almost in the vein of like an NFL films, the way they do it. Major League Baseball does a decent job through the Hall of Fame, but hockey has such a rich history of all these unknown stories that I think that, if they want to grow the game even further than what it is, you kind of have to know where you're going, or you have to know where you've been if you're going to know where you're going. So tell us about that one.
Sure. Well, the Barilko story is quite extraordinary. So for those who maybe don't know the name, Bill Barilko was a player with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He played 5 seasons with the Maple Leafs and won the Stanley Cup with the team in 4 of those 5 seasons. Quite a story. A defensive defenseman for the most part, certainly wasn't a goal scorer, heavy checking, defensive defenseman. Anyway, 1951, every game in the final against the Montreal Canadiens goes into overtime. In the final game, the Leafs are up 3-1 at that point. In the 5th game, the game goes into overtime once again. Barilko takes a chance. He was told not to go deep and get caught because there were guys like Maurice Richard who could certainly score and take advantage of the play. But he saw a loose pocket around the face-off circle just to the right of the Montreal Canadiens goaltender Jerry McNeil. And he took a chance. He gambled and he won. He dove in after it, took a backhand, and it went over McNeil's shoulder into the goal. So he became the instant Stanley Cup champion. 1951, he couldn't go anywhere without being lauded, free meals, free drinks, whatever it happened to be. End of that summer, he's getting ready for training camp, and his dentist up in Timmins, Ontario, Northern Ontario, says, listen, you want to go for one last fishing trip? And Bill says, sure, I'll go. It sounds like fun. The dentist had already asked a couple of other people who either couldn't go or they deferred to Bill Barilko. Anyway, they go up to a place called Seal River, just off of Hudson Bay in the Quebec side of Hudson Bay shoreline. And they go up there and they're fishing for something called Arctic char, and they have a great time. And that's the last that anybody saw of them. They came back, they refueled on the way, and that's the last anybody literally saw them. But the plane never returned. And it started the greatest manhunt in Canadian history, Canadian aerial history. They looked and looked and looked, and people scoured the forests. The planes flew over a broad area of the province, and there was no sign of either Barilko or his dentist Henry Hudson, or of the plane anywhere. Now you have to remember that the forests are really dense in Northern Ontario, so it was almost impenetrable to see. Anyway, the Leafs had to continue on without their star defenseman. The 50s were not very fruitful for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They made the playoffs a few times, but they didn't win any more Stanley Cups. It was a tough time for them all in all. And the Leafs don't win another Stanley Cup until 1962. Ironically, the same year that the plane and the skeletal bodies of Hudson and Barilko are found. So the curse of Bill Barilko, the parallels are uncanny. So it's a story that I knew about. And I was sitting at the Hockey Hall of Fame that day, and I noticed that several people came in and asked about the particular photo. There's a great photo. You can see Barilko from behind scoring the goal on Jerry McNeil. It's a great shot by a brother team called the Turovsky brothers. And they were very well known in the 40s and 50s and late 30s as well. But anyway, so people kept requesting this photo. So I asked the gentleman at the front desk, is that usual that so many people would ask about this photo? And he said, other than the Bobby Orr goal of 1970, it's the most requested photo that we have in the Hockey Hall of Fame archives. And you have to know there are 3 million shots there. So it's quite a feat into itself. So I thought, that's interesting. And I started to think, well, wait a minute here. Hang on. That's the most requested photo. One of our volunteers is a lady named Ann Klisenich, just happened to be Bill Barilko's sister. And she came in every week and was a lovely, lovely lady and a great friend of mine as well. She often brought her husband and her son as well. And so there was that Barilko tie. And then I used to work in the music industry prior to working in hockey. And I had worked for a company called MCA. One of the artists that we have is a band called The Tragically Hip out of Kingston.
Yep.
And they had recorded a song called 50 Mission Cap. And I had worked with the band during their second album, or their second full album anyway, the Road Apples album. And so I knew the guys very well. So I thought, wait a minute. The photo, the archives, Ann Klisenich, sister, the Tragically Hip. I got to write this book. And so I made that my my project and talked to everybody who knew anything about it, whether they were teammates, whether they were people who had fueled his plane, ex-girlfriends, you name it. And it was probably the book I'm most proud of. It really was the right timing, and it's been optioned a couple of times for a film. It's never come to pass, but I think someday, whether I'm involved or not, I think someday someone will make a film of this. I just think people need to see and hear this story. It's just extraordinary how all the pieces kind of fit and sometimes didn't fit together to create a legend in hockey history.
That's incredible. And, I'm glad you mentioned The Hit because they're such a great band. And, a friend of mine, actually, he also listens to the show, Bob Latchett. He's a huge, huge Tragically Hip fan. He's got Tragically Hip posters all over his house. And it's a real shame what happened with Gord Downie. What a tragedy.
Oh,
and
what
terrible.
A hockey fan too, a big Boston fan, but just a lovely guy. As I mentioned, I worked with him quite extensively during probably about a year and a half. And whenever we would get together, never talked about music, ever. We talked hockey. Every single time Gord would talk about hockey and pick my brain, or he'd ask about my nothing career, but he'd ask about my career, or I would pick his brain about playing goal for very good teams in the Kingston area. And even the other guys in the band, they all played hockey, not to the same level as Gord Downie, but they all played hockey as well. They all had hockey heroes, favorite teams. So that's what we talked about every time we would get together for a meal or a drink or whatever it happened to be. Great guys, fabulous guys.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. So I want to ask you about another one of your books, and it's about you wrote it with a personal favorite of mine, Larry Robinson. Oh. And I'll tell you a quick story. I actually got to meet Larry Robinson when I was a kid. It was 1990, I believe. Gump and I went out to Buffalo to see a Kings Sabres game out at the Old Odd. I was a huge Wayne Gretzky fan growing up, and we just happened to be at the same hotel that the Kings were staying at. And it was just an incredible experience. They were coming off the team bus as we were checking in. Now, of course, I'm losing my mind, right? Seeing all these, he's trying to check in, and I'm like, you got to give me something to write with it. Look at it. It's all the Kings, right? So
I'll never forget that experience.
So long story short, I did get most of it, and most of they were all great, but they're like, okay, here you go, have a nice day. Well, Larry Robinson, legend, right? An absolute legend. You knew he was obviously going to the Hall of Fame then. He took the time to sit there with this, 14 or 15-year-old kid and talk to me for about 5 minutes. Just sit there talking hockey, took a couple of pictures, and it was just a swell guy. I mean, just an amazing, amazing man. So tell us a little bit about the great defender.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. Well, Larry's a fabulous guy, quality guy. I had written a book previous to that about Derek Sanderson, played with the Bruins and a number of other teams as well. And I guess he had either read it or someone within his circle had read the book and really enjoyed it. So his son-in-law had said, Larry, you've already had a book out, talking to his father-in-law. Larry, you've already had a book out or two, but it didn't cover the latter parts of your career. It didn't cover the coaching side of things as well. And you didn't get into your mental health issues that, kind of got glossed over at the time, but they challenged him when he was with New Jersey. So they got a book deal on their own. And then they were looking for someone to write the book. And I guess my name came up, and because they had read the Derek Sanderson book, again, I'm not sure if it was Larry Robinson or his son-in-law, but said, oh yeah, I know the guy and I love that book. And so we had a meeting, got together in Los Angeles. I happened to be there for some other business, and we got together and had a meal. And I guess Larry thought I was a good guy, and he liked what I had done, and we decided to forge the deal, and we moved forward. So it was tricky because Larry was really busy at the time. He was working with the Sharks. Pardon me. So it was almost exclusively done by way of phone, which was fine. I quite often like to sit with the guys as well and spend as much time just to get a real feel for them as well. We did have breakfast a couple of times when they came into Toronto to play, when the Sharks came into Toronto to play. Had breakfast, met him the evening before with a coffee, and really hit it off well. But most of it was done by way of phone, and it gave me a chance to really get to know the person behind what we were writing about. Class, loved by everybody, respected by opponents, including Tiger Williams, and it went on and on and on. And it really was a fun book to write. There were some challenges, that were tough for Larry to talk about, but at the same point, he thought it would help people too, talking about having, some mental health issue, a nervous breakdown, I'll say, while he was with the Devils and in the coaching capacity. But it was one that we really enjoyed doing. It was released in both English and French, and did surprisingly well. It did very, very well for Larry. So we keep in touch since. Again, class guy and delightful guy to talk to.
Oh, he is just an amazing man, really. And it's funny that you mentioned the Derek Sanderson book, because there it is. I've got my copy with me. So that, my friend, you just gave the perfect segue into talking about Crossing the Line, the autobiography of Derek Sanderson that you wrote with him. That had to be an interesting story to record, to say the least.
Oh my! Well, first of all, thank you, Scott. And I didn't mention it to get a plug either, but I think
no, it's okay.
He's trying to figure out how to get you to sign it over the internet.
Yeah, electronic signature, right?
How can we do that?
So
well, you got to just go.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the pro.
We'll figure something out.
So I run a charity called Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer, raising money for cancer research up here in Toronto. And I have, and so what we do is teams sign up, but top fundraising teams get to draft a celebrity onto their team. So because of my background in the music industry and with the hockey side of things as well, I recruit those celebrities, among other chores that I do. I'm the MC, I do the publicity, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so we get 70 celebrities, or at least in that ballpark, for every competition, every tournament. And most are from the hockey world, but some are from the media world, some are from the music world, some are from Olympics, whatever it happens to be. But anyway, I had approached Bobby Orr at one point. I'd had some dealings with him through the Hockey Hall of Fame, helped put his museum together in Parry Sound, Ontario. And so we had hit it off quite well. And I asked Bobby to be involved, and he said he couldn't, but he said, would you be interested in maybe talking to Derek Sanderson? I said, are you kidding me? I have no way to contact him.
Do humans breathe air?
Exactly. So he set up a phone call with Derek, and we really hit it off well. I asked him to be involved in our road hockey event, and Derek is not able to play. He had both hips replaced. He's had his knee replaced. He's a cancer survivor as well, but he came up as, you could still draft him. I mean, teams loved drafting him because if nothing else, between games, they sat and heard Derek Sanderson tell stories. Anyway, he came up, and I guess he liked what I was doing, and he liked me, and we just sat and talked, and he just turned around at one point and said, look, I'm considering writing my story. I think you'd be the guy. Would you be interested? As you said, are you kidding me? Absolutely. So we struck a deal with a publisher and went from there. Now, I'll tell you, as much as the book was really, really fun to do, it was also really challenging to do, because Derek's attention span is about this long. So I would try to plan. I would have an agenda like you had for me and things like that. So, so Derek, next week when we talk, we'll talk about the Philadelphia Blazers of the World Hockey Association. Okay, Kev, you're on. So the next week I would call him, or the next day I would call him, or whatever. And all right, Derek, so, you're with the Boston Bruins, you win the Stanley Cup, 1972. And all of a sudden, Johnny McKenzie, blah, 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 and get into the Philadelphia Blazers. Yeah, okay. So me and Mike Walton are playing with the Bruins, and we run through his last game. Well, I don't want to stop them because the stories are too good, but they have nothing to do with the WHA, nothing to do with anything. And that was like him all the time. It was never, ever what I wanted to talk about, but it was at the same point, it was what I wanted to hear. But I had to do so much cutting and pasting and fact checking and trying to verify the years and the people involved and put it in a chronological order as well. And the best part of it, or not, is the best book is not the one in your hand, but it's actually what's on the cutting room floor. Oh boy, there are stories. We had several editors, and when I say editors, I don't mean in the official sense necessarily. But it started off, I sent it off to Derek, my manuscript, and his wife called me back and said, "Okay, Kevin, I've made some notes here. I don't think we need to talk about 6 girls in bed with Derek at the same time. I've got 2 sons who are in university right now." Okay. and there's a word that is kind of a street term for the women's chest. Starts with T and ends with T. And Derek uses that phrase liberally, but she said, "Kevin, there is no word in the world that I am more offended by than the T word." So all of a sudden it had to come breast, boob, chest, any word.
The thesaurus is on fire at this point.
Yeah. So that was the start of it. There were several sexual escapades that came out. And so then it went to Bobby Orr. And Bobby Orr said, "Okay, Kevin, I'm not going to read the whole book, but I skimmed through it and I have a real problem." I said, "Oh my God. Okay. Now tell me, Bobby, what's up?" He said, "Well, there's a story about the Bruins playing in Oakland." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, we were down," and I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I don't remember specifically, but they were down 5-0, I think, at the time, going into the 3rd period. And Harry Sinden came into the dressing room and said, "Look, guys, the game's over. Forget about 2 points. Let's just go out there and show them that they can't, run over us, that they can't beat us, in the alley, as they say, that they're going to have to intimidate us. They're going to have to move forward that way, and we'll fight them. We'll put them through the boards. We'll do whatever." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Is that not factual, Bobby?" He said, "Oh, no, it's very factual." The Bruins actually came back, and I think they won 6-5. He said, but what you've done, Kevin, is you've made Harry Sinden a Hockey Hall of Fame coach. You've taken away his integrity. All of a sudden, he's thrown a game. He's given 2 points away. That's talking about a Hall of Fame coach there. There's no way that's going in the book. So I had to change it ever so slightly and take out some of Harry Sinden's things. Then the lawyers. Our lawyers looked and they took several stories out. The publisher's lawyers came along. They took several stories out. So the book you got is really what I think is a very good book. So I'm trying to be modest, but at the same point, there are several stories that are lying fallow on my floor downstairs that no one will ever read.
So there's the unofficial version around somewhere, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And every once again, Derek will call me up and say, hey, Kev, maybe there's a second book. What do you think, Derek? There may be, but it won't be with the stuff that you left behind. Right? Oh boy. Anyway, we had a lot of fun with it. It was a lot of work, but boy, it was fun too. And although I'd had some success, mostly in Canada with books that I had, that opened up all kinds of doors. First of all, it was the first book I had published in the United States, and it did very, very well. And the book did very well in Canada too. And all of a sudden, things like the Larry Robinson story happened, where people would approach me like, "Wait a minute, I'm a fan who just happens to put a few stories together," but people approaching me about perhaps working with them on the book. And to be candid, I have to turn down more than I accept, unfortunately, only because there's only so many hours in a day. But it opened a lot of doors for me. And really, Derek and I have remained friends through the years, and just a lovely, lovely man. Got a bit of an edge to him. He's always good for 10 stories. As soon as he calls, I've got to lock in the next 90 minutes because it's going to be the Derek show from there. But it's wonderful to do too, and he's a great, great guy.
Kind of sounds like Scott's show. I got to lock in the next 90 minutes.
Hey, well, especially after that shot you whistled by my ear, now I'm going to take another 15 minutes on top of that.
Yeah, all right. Rob will be looking for you.
Yeah, I know. Derek Sanderson, he was really like the Joe Namath of hockey at the time.
Yeah, he definitely was. In fact, he worked with Joe Namath in a bar called Bachelor's 3. They had several locations, and Derek was handed the keys and said, "It's yours." And he had the Boston one, and he had what he called power of the pen. He could just sign it off. So if there'd be all kinds of bills. He'd buy drinks for all the women in the bar, or he'd buy drinks for all his athlete buddies, or whatever he felt like doing, and just sign it off at the end. And it really, although he had begun his drinking ways prior to that, it really escalated his vices. Sure. and became a problem that, thank goodness, in the early 80s, he was able to rehabilitate himself and get clean with the thanks and love of Bobby Orr helping him out. So So, it was a real problem because it was a crazy wild time, and the Playboy Club was next door to their club. So they would just bring the girls over after their shifts. And when there are beautiful girls, they quite often follow wonderful men.
Oh, yes. Of course. Of course.
I have an old hockey news issue when Derek was a rookie, and it had it was half a page. Is this the future NHL player? It had Derek's face with his long hair, and then all around it, it had back then everyone had crew cuts, and there was a big article. Did you remember that, Kevin?
I don't specifically remember the ad, but Derek, I don't know whether he would have had a Hall of Fame career, but he'd been a leading goal scorer in the Ontario Hockey League. But he came into the league, and it was the time with Phil Esposito and, some great players already. So Harry Sinden, the coach, sat him down and said, look, at Derek, where you can really add value to the Boston Bruins is to be our third line center, to be a checking center. And you and Don Marcotte and Ed Westfall, we need to shut down the big boys. We need you on your Facebook. Sorry, face-off prowess. Whoa! Face-off prowess. And so Derek had to reinvent himself. He had always been a goal scorer. He was the Calder Trophy winner that particular year, Barry. And so between becoming a third line center, a checking center, I guess I should say, and the fact that later on the alcohol and drugs and women caught up to him as well, really kind of derailed his career. You saw a terrific hockey player, especially in those first couple of years, winning the Cup in 70 and 1972 as well. But things kind of went away from there. So nobody really knows, including Derek, how good he could have been. But I think is he the future of the NHL? He specifically wasn't necessarily, but it opened our eyes to the fact that the players were moving away from the crew cuts that you mentioned, Barry, from the gray slacks and the blazers and whatever, and all of a sudden becoming their own men. They weren't necessarily ruled by the team so much. All of a sudden they had agents. We're making big money. We're out socially. So that was part of the new NHL, and Derek was right at the forefront of that.
And the Players Union helped them out a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
Before the Players Union, they wouldn't dare do any of that stuff.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah,
the owners had all the power prior to that.
Right.
And that was really happening across all sports at that time too. I mean, MLB with Marvin Miller, leading the way, and football, basketball. It was all just a very rapidly changing time. And you had mentioned just before you started with Derek, the Scotiabank Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, because anything to do with cancer causes very near and dear to my heart. So I'd love to hear about that.
Well, sure. So I had been working at the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I lost my dad to cancer. And there was one of those soul-searching periods of life where I thought, I loved working in the music industry. I loved working in hockey. But I wonder if there isn't more to life at some point. And so I thought long and hard about it. And I moved into the cancer research realm. As a publicist, I became the director of media relations for the Princess Margaret Cancer Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation, the fundraising arm of Cancer Research Hospital based here in Toronto, one of the top ones in the world. So I continued writing for the Hockey Hall of Fame. I continued doing their publications. So I kept my ties to hockey, kept writing books, but all of a sudden I was in the cancer realm. So to raise money for cancer research, foundations do any number of different things, and we've heard all of them: walks and runs and bicycle rides and whatever. Well, as the publicist, I had to be involved with all of them, and as an employee, I was actively involved in all of them, but they didn't speak to me. So, a 200-kilometer bicycle ride for a guy who hadn't owned a bike since he was 18 and wasn't in shape to do it, but I did it. So,
let's go with another plan.
And a 60-kilometer walk over the course of 2 days. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't work there. And I did it, and I enjoyed it. But again, it's not something that really spoke to me. So they asked me, Kevin, what do you think? Is there something that you think might help us raise money for cancer research. And I said, well, I mean, there's an area that I don't think you've tapped, and I wonder if maybe you should consider it. It's playing hockey. I said, well, wait a minute. What do you mean? I said, well, I'm a hockey guy, but I just have to think that there's something in the hockey realm that will raise a great deal of money. So we brought in some consultants, and that probably was the wrong thing to do. They suggested, okay, one team can play on the North Pole. Well, hang on. How? And how's that going to raise money for us? Maybe one team, but whatever.
Yeah.
My wife said to me at some point, guys, you guys are spinning your wheels. Why don't you play road hockey? That way you don't have to rent ice. You don't have to have equipment. You don't even have to be good. You need a pair of running shoes and a hockey stick. Well, the light went on over my head. So I brought it back to the foundation, and oh my God, Kevin, there's got to be a reason why it hasn't been done. Well, I looked around and I couldn't find anybody who had tried it and had watched it fail. So we started to put our plans together, and sure enough, I guess it'd be 11 years ago now, we had our first road hockey to conquer cancer. The first one raised $2 million in one day.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Holy mackerel.
Now the coronavirus in fact, it eliminated last year's. So we've had 9 so far, and we've raised $23 million for cancer research through a game that we all grew up playing.
That's fantastic.
It's a one-day event. The teams play 5 games through the course of the day, and we've got live music, and we've got great food through sponsors. We've got just all kinds of things going on. You can fundraise and have a celebrity on your team. There's so many things going on that we just have so much fun doing it. It's grown through the years, but like I said, $23 million to cancer research, and hopefully we'll have another one this year. We're hoping that the pandemic will flatten enough that we can have teams, probably not as many as we usually have in the 165 range. Probably not that many people are willing to all get together and raise the money in time and all that kind of stuff. But we're hoping that we can at least continue the brand on, and that's the whole deal.
That's awesome. Now, can anybody put together a team to enter it, or how does that work?
So it's all about fundraising, as you can imagine. So the whole crux behind it is that anybody can enter a team. You raise $10,000 to play through the course of the day. Mm-hmm. So I mean, some heavy rollers, they get their company to do it, and they just find the players. Others, they throw in $1,000 each. But most teams, like mine, for example, we do car washes, we do barbecues, we do online auctions, whatever it takes to get us over. We try and ask everybody to raise 10 guys. We ask each guy to raise $1,000, and that's the way we do it. So like I said, we get 165 teams who sign up, mostly men, but we also have women. We have some co-ed teams as well. We have those 70 celebrities that I mentioned too, and we just have the time of our life, dawn to dusk, and rain or some. There have been some years where it's been 90 degrees, and others where we had frost. We had to clear off the asphalt. But it's just like when we grew up. It's like, hey, whatever it is that day, we're playing. So yeah,
that's awesome. Well, if you do get it up and running again this year, by all means, send me some information. I'll get the word out down here. And
I would love it. Thank you.
And I'll get the sandbagger here. Yeah.
No, I'm not playing goal.
Yeah, no, your wrist shot. You're the secret weapon.
Yeah. I want to keep my wrist.
Maybe we can team up. Rink of Dreams and
there you go.
Marty's illegal thick,
Absolutely. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It'd be a great reason to go to Toronto too.
It would be, oh God, just seeing Dave in goal would be the, he reminded me of an old goalie I remembered who played for the Ottawa Senators. It was Legs Frazier.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Legs was the most, unorthodox goalie. Yeah. He threw his sticks up in the crowd. He threw his gloves up in the crowd. He threw his pucks. Whenever he was scored on, he threw his, stuff. And, he got in trouble, but he was a pretty good goalie, too. Your great uncle played with him in Ottawa.
Yeah, he did. So we talked about my love of hockey. Something I didn't know growing up was that I had a relative who played with the Maple Leafs. So I'll try and cut it short. I'm so sorry, guys, if I'm going.
No, don't be sorry at all.
So when my father passed away, as I mentioned, I found all kinds of little things, but I found a little box that he had made when he was probably in grade 7 or 8. One of those things that he made in shop class. And it had a little lock on it, and that's great. But I could tell there was something inside. And so I asked my mom, hey, listen, do you have the key? And she said, well, no, just pry the back off. I said, well, I don't want to wreck Dad's box. And she said, just pry the back off. So I pried the little hinges off and opened it up. And it was filled with little newspaper clippings and pieces of paper and stuff. Clearly, it was a teenage boy's little box of notions and had to do with the Leafs. So there were pictures of Leafs that were cut out, and there were notes. Oh, Turk Broda has a bloody nose, tucks the gauze into his pads. And clearly my dad had been listening to the radio and just made notes as we were all wont to do. Anyway, I wondered why one particular guy's photo was in Dad's box of pictures more often than the others. And it was a guy named Jack Mcfarlane, and I didn't know anything about him. I mean, I knew my hockey pretty well, and the Leafs of the 40s were I would say my specialty, but I didn't know his name, or if I did, it just hadn't resonated. So I started to do research to find out why Dad liked him so much. Anyway, I researched, and I found all kinds of great information. He only played 3 years. It was all during the war years. He was a university student. He was getting his engineering degree at the same time. He never practiced with the team. He would just show up with his equipment and play games. Because the war was raging at the time, he could only play home games. He could only play in Canada. He could play in Montreal as well, but because of his studies, he mostly just played in Toronto. So anyway, just an interesting story. He had won the fastest skater award at one point, and he scored a goal in overtime, one of the longest games in NHL history, and he scored the winning goal. So lots of interesting little things. Anyway, I thought, I wonder if this guy's alive. So I would, any former Leafs that I knew or I had access to, I would ask guys like Ted Kennedy or Howie Meeker or guys of that realm. And oh God, great guy. Don't know whatever happened to him. He kind of disappeared. So nobody knew what happened to this Jack Mcfarlane. So I started to realize that there were some touch points. It seems like if he was alive, he either lived in Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, or St. John, New Brunswick. So,
quite the wide swath you got to cover there, right?
Yeah. All the major Canadian cities in one swatch.
Coast to coast.
Yep.
So this was prior to the internet. So what I did is I wrote letters to the editor of each of the daily newspapers in each of those cities saying, hey, my name's Kevin Shea. I'm trying to find out any details about a guy named Jack Mcfarlane. If you have any information, would you call me? Well, only one newspaper published it, and it was the Toronto Sun. Well, the phone rang nonstop from 6 a.m. till I finally had to unplug the phone at 10 o'clock that night. I spoke to everybody, former scouts, former players, guys that he had coached, former girlfriends, neighbors, but nobody knew whether he was alive or dead. But I got enough clues that I figured that if he was still alive, he lived on a street called Gainsborough in Ottawa, Ontario. So I didn't know whether I should do it or not, but I went to the yellow pages, or not, wouldn't be the yellow pages, be the white pages back then. Yeah, that dates me. Anyway. And
they're only yellow after age, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what dated you.
Exactly. So I went to the Ottawa phone book, and I called all the J. McLeans that were in the book. And I finally found one, and I said, by any chance, hello, is this Jackie McLean? Who wants to know? It's a guy named, my name's Kevin Shea, and I'm a hockey historian. And are you the Jack McLean? Jackie McLean is what he went by then. Are you the Jackie McLean who played with the Toronto Maple Leafs? Yeah, why? Well, I'm just trying to find a little information out, and he kind of softened a little bit. And as the conversation went on, he said, I knew some Sheas. I said, oh, yeah. That's not an uncommon. I mean, it's not a really popular name necessarily, but, it's not uncommon. Anyway, he said, there's a guy in Toronto that I knew named Howard Shea. Well, my jaw dropped. My dad's name is Howard Shea.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
I said, wait a minute. Howard Shea. He said, yeah, lived in Meadowvale. Wait a minute. it's now part of Mississauga, Ontario. I said, wait a minute, my dad lived in Meadowvale. Well, don't you know? I said, know what? He said, Howard's my cousin. What? Wait a minute. So he told me the story, and it gets a little bit dark, but it turns out that my grandfather had committed suicide. Left my grandmother with 8 children. Some were grown, but including my dad, who at the time was probably 2 or 3 years old. No, sorry, he was 4 or 5 years old, and my uncle, who was 2 years old at the time. My grandmother had never worked before. They were not wealthy by any means. They were quite poor, actually. And so she was in desperate straits. And so she called on her family. And so Jack's mother said to her, Jessie, you can't keep those children. You've got to put them into foster care. And my grandmother said, I will never put those children in foster care. And don't you ever talk to me ever again. And the family split. So I had never heard Jack McLean's name and didn't know anything about it. He brought the story together. So I said, well, do you know anything more? He said, well, I haven't seen Howard forever. I said, well, Howard doesn't live any longer. He passed away in 91. But I said, what can you tell me? He said, well, last time I saw him, boy, oh boy, I guess he was probably about 15 years old. And I always thought he was a good kid. So I went up to Meadowvale to see him. And it was the middle of the winter, brought my equipment with me. And they were playing shinny on the Credit River there. And so I came down and said hi. And Howard was so surprised because all of a sudden his cousin, who played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, was playing hockey with them. So at the end of playing, this is Jack talking. At the end of playing, I said, you know what, Howard, the equipment's too heavy to carry. Can you use it? And my dad was, oh my God, are you kidding me? Again, he came from a very poor family. So there's a duffel bag with shin pads and gloves and skates. I said, wait a minute, Jack, I've got my dad's hockey equipment in the garage. He said, well, go get it. So I ran out and got it. And he said, okay, if it's mine, it'll say JM17. Damned if it isn't there in the equipment.
Wow. No way. That is awesome.
Yeah. So Jack and I forged a friendship. It started off, as I mentioned, a little bit fiery. It got softer and softer, and we became the best of friends, And I went up to see him. I wouldn't say every second week, but pretty close to it. From Toronto to Ottawa is about a 5-hour drive. But I went up often to see him, and I'd stay in a hotel and go to Jack's house. And every time he wanted to go to Red Lobster for dinner, and okay, here we go. I'm a vegetarian, not the best thing for me. I'll have a bun and a salad. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Whoa, boy, this is a great night out for me.
Oh, boy. But he just loved it. He ate. But it was odd because I'm telling way more of the story than you care to know. But during the winter time, I would go to visit him, and he would have, I wouldn't be exaggerating to say 60 or 70 empty Pepsi cans across the counters of his kitchen. And so I thought that he was very, very poor as well. So I was sending the grocery gateway, or whatever the one that was in Ottawa, truck there to bring him fresh food on a monthly basis to make sure that he had enough to eat. Well, it turns out that he's very fine. He had a pension. He was an engineer. He had a great pension, whatever. The reason he had all the Pepsi was because during the winter time, he couldn't drive. He'd had some concussions when he played hockey, and he'd had some surgery. And so they took away his license. So he had a 3-wheeled bike. And during the winter time, he didn't want to trust the streets of Ottawa, which can be pretty cold and slippery. So he just bought a ton of pop, and he would put that on his cereal. Well, Kevin, it's wet. I said, Jack, he said, oh, the milk goes bad, but the Pepsi never does.
Wow.
Oh my.
Practicality 101 right there.
Yeah.
Kevin.
So Jack was a character, and I just loved getting to know him, and we really, really had a great time. It's my Tuesdays with Maury rather book that someday I'll write, but I just loved it so much. And he begged me to come up one October. And Jack, I'm tied up with work, but I'll be there before the snow flies. I promise you that. But the next time I saw him was doing the eulogy at his funeral. He passed away that week. And so we went to the funeral. Here's a name, Barry, that might make some sense. But one of the people who was there was Dr. Bobby Kopp, who was the captain of the Ottawa Senators back in the Legs Fraser days. And Bobby Kopp had played with Jack with the Leafs, but also with the Ottawa Senators, who were at that time, they were a Quebec Hockey League team. They were senior hockey. So that's my Jack McLean story, and why that one's close to my heart. So there we are.
Wow.
I have to ask you, did Jack ever talk about his overtime goal? It was back in 1943. They were playing the Detroit Red Wings, and he scored 10 minutes and 43 seconds into the fourth overtime.
You are
and
good,
it was
Barry.
One of the longest Stanley Cup games. Well, there was another game, and I have a comic book of it. It was Detroit, and it's called Marathon Hockey. It's a 12-page comic book that was written back in the late 40s on the longest NHL hockey game. Wow. But this one I remember because I was doing, as you know, ever since I found out I've been doing that, and I was wondering if he ever talked about that game with you.
Yeah, he did for a couple of reasons. His dad had never seen him play hockey. His dad was, I'm not really sure of the reason, and I've got to find out more about it, but Jack lived with his aunt and uncle during the times he was going to the University of Toronto and playing with the Leafs. Mm-hmm. His dad was working at different places across the country. So his dad had never seen his son, Jack, play a Leaf game. Jack's father, I hope this isn't getting too convoluted, Jack's father and his buddies decided to drive down to see that particular game. Jack got them tickets in Detroit. It was because the school was over at that point. He was able to play in the U.S. at that time. And so it was the only game his father ever saw him play. The game goes into overtime. King Clancy is the referee. Oh. And they go into the second and third overtime. And, because Jack would have been what's called a sub, probably the equivalent of second line at the time, maybe beyond that a little bit. But he was a little bit fresher than some of the stars like Sillaps and I don't know if Sill was even there, Ted Kennedy and some of those guys, Gay Stewart. And Jack took the shot and Bud Poyle took the shot. Jack was in front of the net. The puck goes in. The Leafs win the game, and they win in overtime. But the goal scorer wasn't determined for 48 hours after the play.
Oh, wow.
Some people thought Bud Poyle scored. Some thought that Jack had tipped it in. They interviewed the Red Wings players, the Leaf players, King Clancy, the linesman as well. And it came down to King Clancy's word, and he said, it went in off McLean, and Bud Poyle was quite angry because he wanted the glory, and so he and Jack never spoke again, even though they were line mates.
Oh man!
Yeah, Bud Poyle wanted to do a whole lot of things, but they didn't speak, and then Bud obviously, well, I wouldn't say obviously, but Bud went on to be traded to Chicago as part of the Max Bentley trade. A little bit later on, but Jack actually gave me the puck that he scored that goal with, so I've got it downstairs in a box.
Wow.
It's even displayed, but I've got the puck, at least the one that Jack tells me that was given to him by the team after that goal. So special for him because his dad saw it because of the legacy behind the long. At the time, it was certainly was within the top 10 of longest games in NHL history. Mm-hmm. Since then, it's been moved down a little bit.
Yeah, man, oh man, that's incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
Stuff. Crazy stuff.
It's just amazing how it all just kind of comes full circle like that, isn't it? It's astounding.
The world is a pretty amazing place. The hockey community, as much as we're spread out all over the world, it's actually surprisingly small. You mentioned a couple of people's names here and there, and oh God, I played with him, or oh, I know his brother, or it's amazing how that happens through and through. Barry, you must have that happen to you all the time. Well,
yeah. We had Scott. I'm sorry, I'll stop it. I don't want to take over the show. Can I tell the story?
Good.
Okay, last summer during the reunion. Well, 2 summers ago, we had Mike Smith, who played for the Syracuse Blazers. He was in the movie Slapshot. and he became an AHL linesman for 15 years. He came, and we had George Finn who came. He played up at Windsor, but he's best known as playing Rocky in the movie Youngblood.
Right.
He came. Well, those two got together, started talking. Where are you from? Seneca Lake. Wow, I live on Seneca Lake. What street you live on? Those two have lived within 10 miles of each other for the past 20 years.
Pretty amazing.
And they both go to Florida, and guess what? They go down to Florida every winter in the same town. They never knew that. They knew of each other. You know, George knew that Mike, because Mike refereed some of his games. And of course, Mike knew George from the movie, Youngblood and stuff. And I get that every year when I have players coming. They may not know each other, but they have a friend who played with this person, or, it's so great. It's so great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how hockey is like one gigantic game of 6 ways to Kevin Bacon, isn't it?
It's so true. It really, really is. It's amazing.
So Kevin, I just wanted to ask you real quick about your work with the Hockey Hall of Fame, and then I wanted to get into your Brian Mcfarlane Award for the Society of International Hockey Research. We recently had Tom Talar on, who's the administrator for the EHL.com. I don't know if you know who he is or not.
I know of him, don't know him. Yeah.
Yep. And he was recently honored by the Society of International Hockey Research as well. So whichever one you want to talk about first, I'll put you in the driver's seat, my friend.
Let's talk about the Hockey Hall of Fame.
All right.
Again, crazy story. I'll cut it back as much as I can.
No, don't worry. Don't worry.
I was working for a record company at the time. It was called Attic Records, and Attic was distributed at that point by A&M Records and then later on by MCA. But Attic was the largest independent record company in Canada. And so I was the vice president of promotion and publicity at the time. The boss came to us and said, look, everything's good, but I want to challenge you all. We'd like to see if there's any additional funding any additional revenue streams we can get for Attic Records. Now, I had come from Warner's and BMG and Universal Music and stuff. And so this was, it was really fun to work at an independent where you could get your feet involved in so many different things. I guess my fingers involved, not my feet. So the boss said, listen, I want you all to come up with no more than 2 ideas, put them in the suggestion box or whatever we had at the time. Don't put your names on them. And the best 2 will get a $500 bonus for each of the ideas that we choose, plus the gold record of your choice. Gold records being for sales plateaus in the music industry. Hey, platinum record for this guy, or gold for this guy, or whatever. So anyway, I suggested 2, and I got lucky, and both of mine were picked randomly because I didn't have my name on them. So the first one was I think I called it Hair Farmers. I forget, but anyway, it was basically 80s classic rock anthems in a compilation. Cherry Pie by Warrant, Round and Round by Rat, etc.
Yeah. Now you're down my alley. All right.
Yeah, mine too. So I think I called it Hair Farmers, and nobody liked Hair Farmers, but we changed it. But I happened to run into somebody at a hockey game, sat beside them at a Leaf game, and we were talking about something or other. And the young lady said, well, listen, we do all kinds of sponsorship. We have the rights to Wayne's World. I said, what? She said, wow. Do you have any properties that it might work with? I said, well, listen, I've just put together a compilation of 80s classic rock. She said, oh my God, that would be perfect. So she said, I've only got the rights. I've got 2 photos and the name. But if your company wants to license them, I think it would be a great match. So we licensed it, Wayne's World, and we had pictures of Garth and Wayne on the front from Saturday Night Live, and we had all of these songs, and so I had to be honest and put Wayne's World, music inspired by Wayne's World on it. So all good, and it sold a ton of records. We sold 100,000 copies in Canada, which would be the equivalent of 1 million in the United States. So the other idea was songs that you would hear at a hockey arena. And so, they said, well, Kevin, explore this with us a little bit more. I said, well, things like Stompin' Tom Connors and the hockey song, the Tragically Hip 50 Mission Cap, Europe, the final countdown.
Yeah.
They don't have to be specifically about hockey, but songs that you would hear at a hockey rink. They said,
Rock and
"We
Roll
love
Part
it."
2.
No. So I decided to call it Contact. I don't even know why, but anyway, it sounded good. So I needed to license a photo of a body check. So I went to the Hockey Hall of Fame, and we were going through the 3 million photos. And while we were there, and I was waiting for Phil Pritchard and Craig Campbell, the two guys who carry the Stanley Cup out, and they'll be doing that later this spring. But anyway, they were the two guys there in charge. And while we were there was a pile of photos. I said, "Oh my God, Mel Sudden Death Hill. Oh, Sweeney Shriner." They said, "Wait a minute. How do you know these guys?" I said, "I'm totally into it." Leafs of the 40s. They said, "Well, hang on." So they gave me the 20 that were there. And I think I got 17 out of 20. They weren't all Leafs, but they said, "These are photos that we can't identify." I said, "What?"
Wow.
They said, would you ever volunteer to come here and help us out?" I said, "Yeah, but I mean, I'm vice president of a record company and I'm working 9 to 5 plus concerts and shows and things like that." Well, it turns out that we had summer hours that summer. So Fridays at 1:00, we all knocked off. And so I went to the Hall of Fame every Friday afternoon from 1 until 6:00 or whatever, and identified photos for them. So at some point, life continued on, and I'll cut to the chase. Phil Pritchard came to me and said, "Look, I know you got a great job. I know you're happy there, but would you ever think of coming to work for us? We've got a full-time contract." And I said, "Well, you're not going to believe this, but Attic Records got sold, and we're all out of jobs as of this week." He said, "When can you start?" I said, "See you tomorrow at 9." And I started.
Whoa, that's awesome.
So that was in 2000 or 2001. And I've continued to work with them right through till today. I did have the hiatus working for the Princess Margaret, but I continued doing their magazines and brochures and the captions for the artifacts, and teaching a course at Seneca College in Toronto about hockey history that's run through the Hockey Hall of Fame that I put together as well. So I continued my time with hockey while I was doing the cancer research. And then when the Princess Margaret, they downsized, and sadly I was expendable again. And Phil said, "Perfect timing. Want to come back and work with us again full time? Let's do it." So I'm back there working a full-time contract at the Hall of Fame. So I've been with them since 2000. I can't remember if it's 2000 or 2001, but the happiest. I mean, it's just the greatest job in the world. Imagine.
Oh, I can imagine.
Researching and writing about hockey, teaching about hockey, just immersed in the whole realm of hockey and its wonderful history as well.
There's got to be so much more to the Hall of Fame than what you see on your tour. I mean, there's got to be. As far I'm not asking you for any trade secrets or anything like that, but I mean, as far as the archives themselves, obviously they have much more in the collection there than what you would see on a tour.
Well, and you're spot on, Steve. It's quite incredible. So I actually work in a place called Etobicoke, Ontario, which is the west end of Toronto. The museum is right downtown. Mm-hmm. And probably about 10%, maybe even less than that, of all of the artifacts that the Hockey Hall of Fame has are in the museum. The rest are at the Resource Center in Etobicoke. And that's where I work. And, for example, that's where those 3 million, probably up to 6 million now, photographs are there on slides, on glass plates, on you name it. I mean, it's there. Some digital, I mean, you name it. 3,000 hockey sticks. Milestone hockey sticks or championship hockey sticks. All the stuff that's not in the Hall of Fame is all archived and cataloged appropriately. All Olympic male, Olympic female, Paralympics, World Championship, you name it. Media guides, books, etc., 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 etc. Barry, you'd go out of your mind. Your head would be spinning. Oh, any of you guys.
Oh my God.
Barry has some Kevin envy going on there.
Do they have minor league? I know we have a jersey from the Mohawk Valley Stars that used to be up in the Hall of Fame. They played in the Atlantic Coast Hockey League. They had it on display. This was a few years ago, but they probably don't. But do they have much minor league items up there, or is it mostly just NHL?
Well, NHL has got the marquee value for most people who are visiting the museum, but everything, I mean, every level you can imagine, minor league, women's hockey, like I said, Paralympic, deaf hockey, road hockey, you name it, it's there, and all, you know, beautifully cataloged and archived there so that we can rotate the displays into the museum.
Yeah.
Also, we have what's called an outreach program. So, you know, for example, if Rink of Dreams wanted to have a display of something or other, the Hall of Fame could put together a display of photographs and artifacts and maybe trophies and bring them down to the Rink of Dreams and go from there. And it's that.
There we go.
Oh, you hit a sweet spot.
Yeah. That's how the Baseball Hall of Fame down here is. I've been down. They have all the items downstairs in a basement. Well, I don't want to say basement, but it's like 2 stories below the ground. It's climate controlled, but I can't believe how much stuff they actually have. And, you know, some of it has never been up in the regular Hall of Fame and it's still down there. I could just imagine how much stuff is at the Hockey Hall of Fame. Have you ever been to the Baseball Hall of Fame?
No, I've got to get to Cooperstown someday, and I've got to see that Rink of Dreams, for goodness sake. There we go.
Oh, yes.
But there's so much stuff that it's incomprehensible. The best, so for me to work in it every day is just a dream beyond compare. I work out of my home during the pandemic, but one day a week I go in. I'm the only one who works on that particular day, and I'm going through working on my various projects. But some of the greatest times, just a couple of quick stories. So we're in the same building. It's the Ford Performance Center. It's a 4-pad rink, and it's where the Toronto Maple Leafs practice. It's where the Toronto Marlies from the AHL practice as well. And there's an Olympic size rink as well for Canada's national team or various other purposes. So they've got and they get rented out as well, not the Leaf rink, but the other ones get rented out. So we're on the second floor of the building. The NHL alumni are on the same in the same building as we are. Anyway, there was a time where the Pittsburgh Penguins were practicing at the Ford Performance Center. Had a different name at the time. It was the MasterCard Center. Anyway, they arranged it through their trainer, who had seen our collection, that would the guys all like to come up and see it. Well, you'd swear these kids were 7 and 8 years old again, because all of a sudden, guys like Sidney Crosby, who are as big in the game as anybody, are just in awe because they can actually hold Maurice Richard's hockey stick. Or, you know, we would fool with them as well. We had Sidney Crosby's minor league sweater hung up, and we had, you know, different guys from the team just to make it really fun. But they were they were little kids again, just in absolute awe, going through, telling stories, taking pictures and things. We had the Washington Capitals come through the year they won the Stanley Cup. Same thing. There's Alexander Ovechkin, just again in absolute awe because he's holding whoever it happens to be, Valery Kharlamov's hockey stick, or Gordie Howe's or whoever, and just to see the little boy who's inside the man is quite remarkable. We have a lot of fun with that. So I mean, anybody can make an appointment to come up and do research. You can't just walk in off the street, but it's
Barry's road trip.
Yeah, there it is.
If you ever come to Toronto, you have to build that into your trip, the Resource Center and the Hockey Hall of Fame Museum itself as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely, because I mean, I haven't been to the Hockey Hall of Fame since 2002. I was up in Toronto, and that was just a thrill in itself. And it's so funny because out of all the stuff that was there, and I was the same way, and I'm just some nobody coming off the street, right? And it was just, you're in awe as soon as you walk in the place. But I tell you, the one exhibit that really just kind of stuck with me for some reason, and it wasn't any Superstars exhibit, even though I was a huge Gretzky fan. They had the Gretzky thing right in the front. It was the old-time, typical Canadian living room in the 1950s. They had it set up with an old-time TV. The two kids, you know, obviously they were mannequins, but the two kids watching Hockey Night in Canada with the ginger ale. And it was just it was one of those kind of things that just kind of grabs you inside. You know, it takes you right back to those cold as all get out outside, but it's warm inside. Mittens on the radiator, watching some hockey. It was just fantastic. But I do got to ask you, when Alexander Ovechkin and the Capitals came through, that was a legendary party summer for them. Were they partying all the way through that too?
No, not so. When they came through, they were actually playing the Leafs that night or the next night.
Oh, they were playing. Okay, never mind.
Yeah,
I thought you were talking about during the summer.
Oh yeah, no, and they had donated a championship ring to the Hall of Fame, so they came through to hand it over to Phil Pritchard and put it there. They had rented out the Hockey Hall of Fame Great Hall to have a dinner there that night. And then the next day they practiced and they came up to the Resource Center. So it was during the season. They were all in suit and ties, but boy, they were having fun.
Well, that was a legendary summer. It really was. And I know Keith had a question about the old rings off the Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Okay, so the Stanley Cup has changed shape through the years, but since the 1949, I think it is, it's stayed the same, with the rings equidistant from each other. So there's the cup on the top. There's a few what do I call them, circles or whatever rings. Mm-hmm. But then the actual rings themselves, where the engraving is, there are 5 of them that go down to the base of the trophy. So the problem is that they don't want the Stanley Cup to continue to grow, so it's unwieldy. You can't hold it any longer. So what do? It's a real perplexing thing. So what they do is that when the bottom row is filled, so 13 teams can fit on each of the rings. When the bottom row is filled, they take the top ring off, move each of the rings up, put a new one on the bottom, so it'll all stay the same. Then they flatten out the ring that was taken off, put it in what's called the Great Vault, which is where the original Stanley Cup is kept as well. It's the actual vault from the Bank of Montreal where we exist, and they're flattened out and put there. The sad part of it, so for Montreal Canadiens fans, the legendary names like Butch Bouchard, Jacques Plante, Maurice Richard are no longer on the cup. No longer on the cup. There's only one Toronto Maple Leaf team still on the cup. That's the 67 one. The rest are now flattened and put in the Great Vault, so people can still see it. They can see the actual engraving with some of the mistakes that were made when it was being engraved as well. But the Stanley Cup, at least in our lifetimes, will never change shapes and change shape rather. And that's the way that they do it to keep it uniform each time.
That's
incredible. Isn't it true they have 4 separate Stanley Cups? They have one on display, they have the one in the vault, and they have 2 extra ones?
There's 3 Stanley Cups.
Oh, 3.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's the original one that Lord Stanley donated in 1893, and that's just basically the bowl with a little ebony base on it. Mm-hmm. It's too fragile now to travel. So that one is permanently retired in the Great Vault of the Great Hall. The one that we will see in a couple of weeks' time or less is what we call the Presentation Cup. That one is in the Hockey Hall of Fame until it needs to travel. That's the only one that ever leaves the Hall of Fame. It's the one that Phil Pritchard and Craig Campbell will walk out and hand to Commissioner Bettman. It's the one that when players get a day with the cup, that's the cup that they have to party with. When that one's on the road, there's what's called the second version. And that's the one that's put in the Hall of Fame. It's almost exactly, it takes a real scholar to notice any differences at all. But that's the one that goes in the hall when the other one is traveling. So that way, you never have to put a sign, sorry, folks, Stanley Cup is traveling. You've come from Vladivostok, Russia, and you want to see the Stanley Cup, and it's on the road. There's always a Stanley Cup on display. Yeah.
It was like Clark Griswold gets to Wally World, and sorry, folks, the party's closed.
Can you tell the difference yourself by looking at it?
The only way that I can tell, some of the boys are much better at it than me, but the only way that I can tell was that in 93, I think it was 93, Peter Pocklington and the Edmonton Oilers won the Stanley Cup. And so you have to submit your list of players and recipients who are going to be engraved on the cup to the National Hockey League. Well, somehow something got missed. And when the cup came back, Peter Pocklington's father's name was engraved on the cup. Basil Pocklington. Had nothing to do with the team, but his name is on the cup. Well, rather than redoing the entire band, the entire ring with all the teams, they X'd out Basil Pocklington's name on the presentation cup. On the second version, they just didn't put it on. So that's the only way that I can tell. If it's got the X's on it, that's the presentation cup. If it doesn't that year, that's the second version. That's the only way I can tell. Some of the boys are pretty good about, oh, there's an 1/8 of an inch here, or there's whatever, but that's the way I can tell. Yeah.
And then out of revenge of the rest of the league, he traded Wayne Gretzky. Go figure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you guys will get a kick out of this too, but one of the fun things to do is to look at the presentation cup and read the names and find the spelling mistakes. It's crazy.
Really?
Crazy. Now, it's no longer on the cup, but my best example is Jacques Plante. The 56, 57, 58, 59, and 60 with the Montreal Canadiens. 5 consecutive Stanley Cup championships. Jacques Plante's name is spelled differently 5 different times.
Oh, good God.
No S on Jacques, no E on Plant. You name it, Jockus, whatever. It's just poor guy, 5 different ways. But there's lots of little spelling mistakes that with a fine-tuned eye. Oh my God, I found another one. Leafs with not an F but an E instead of in Leafs in the 1940s. Stuff like that.
Getting back to Jack, he was on the championship team when the Maple Leafs won in 44-45. Is he on the cup?
Oh, he is indeed.
He is, okay.
And I wear his Stanley Cup ring as well.
That's awesome.
I was going to ask if he still had that.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is great.
When Jack passed away, that was one of the things that was left to me from his family. They thought that I had made Jack's final few years very happy and nobody deserved it more than me, which was really, really nice. It was a very special gift to receive. Yeah.
What an honor. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Kevin, tell us a little bit about the Brian Mcfarlane Award.
Well, so the Brian Mcfarlane Award is awarded for excellence in research by SIR, the Society for International Hockey Research. And every year, the executive get together. They can take nominations from other SIR members as well, but they get together and decide whose work was, I have to try and sound modest, but it's difficult. I don't mean it's difficult for me to do. It's just it's I don't want it to sound braggy, but it's whose work was most exemplary that season, or that year rather. And so one year, a few years ago, I was awarded for the books that I've done and the research that I'd done for the Hockey Hall of Fame as well. And I was awarded the Brian Mcfarlane Award, which was it was a special honor anyway, but the fact that I knew Brian quite well, and I'd actually worked on a book with him without being credited, but I'd worked on a book called Team Canada 72, Where Are They Now? And I had interviewed all the players who had played in the Summit Series and then transcribed my interviews and then passed them on to Brian to turn into a book form. So I had known Brian very well. So to win an award that was named after Brian, who had actually been one of the people who started this research organization, the Society for International Hockey Research, was an extra special reward for me, a real special honor for me as well. So I'm very proud to have been a recipient, and every year it's wonderful to see the people and what they've done to accomplish the same thing. So yeah, a lot of fun.
That's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out this segment. Now, you said that you were going to stick around for the rest of the show.
Yeah, sure.
All right. But before we go, I just want you to tell us pretty quick about how your work with the Toronto Maple Leafs Historical Committee, because that's got to be a dream come true.
Oh. How things happen, you never know, right? But I guess I'd written enough books. I'd written a book about Ron Ellis. I'd written a book through the eyes of their oldest season ticket holder, who has since passed, but he'd been a season ticket holder since they were the Toronto St. Patrick's. What else did I... There were other books. Oh, the Bill Barilko book, of course. Anyway, they were putting together a historical committee, and I got an invitation to show up. I thought it'd be a bunch of my peers. I look around the room: George Armstrong, Daryl Sittler, Ron Ellis, Joe Bowen, who does the play-by-play, Cliff Fletcher. Who else was there? I can't even remember off the top of my head. But all of these people, I was the only one from outside the organization to be invited. And they thought that I contributed enough. I might be able, first of all, I contributed enough, I guess, but also that I could really fill in some details from the earliest days of the Leafs that maybe the other guys didn't know enough about. So it was our duty to come up with a number of things, but most importantly, outside of the Scotiabank Arena is something called Legends Row. It's a series of statues, and it was up to us to come up with who were to be the recipients of having a statue made in their likeness, and also the banners that hang from the rafters. Now they're honored members. Now they're retired. At the time they were honored. And so it's up to us. Well, the discussions are crazy, as you can imagine. Just one, and I'm talking out of school a little bit here, but it's a pretty good story. So, one of the names that came up is, hey, we've got all these players outside on Legends Row. We should probably have a coach. So I stepped up and said, you know what, we really should have Conn Smythe there. I mean, he was the owner of the team, but he was, he should be honored in a way. And so that was discussed. Somebody else said Punch Imlach. Well, there were two people in the group who had played for Punch Imlach.
Oh boy.
And so the argument was, okay, the presentation was, okay, he's the winningest coach in Toronto Maple Leaf history. He was the coach behind the bench for 4 Stanley Cup championships, a dynasty. So he had contributed a great deal to the franchise. But these two players who had played under him said, hang on for a second here. If he gets a statue, take mine off. Break the statue, take my banner down. No way am I going to be up there if Imlach is there. It's like, oh my God. So what do you do? These are the kinds of arguments that come up. It runs into some politics, and the arguments on both sides are very valid. Yeah, he is the winningest coach. Yeah, 4 Stanley Cup championships. But he dismantled the team. He fought with the players. He came back for a second time and really dismantled the team back then. So who wins, who loses? So there's no coach behind the bench at this point. Pat Quinn has been talked about. Pat Burns has been talked about. Hap Day has been talked about. But there's no coach at this point. But at some point, I'm sure that there will be a person who is a non-player, whether it's Conn Smythe, which makes perfect sense, or whether it's one of the gentlemen I just mentioned. I'm just not sure.
Sure. Conn Smythe is the guy who built Maple Leaf Gardens as well. Yeah, definitely got to be considered. Well, Kevin, this has just been awesome. This has been awesome fun. We're going to take a quick commercial break. But like I said, I'm hoping you're going to stick around for the rest of the show. But like we always do, we always end the first segment with Breakaway Trivia. And we got a little bit of something new here. Breakaway Trivia is brought to you by Jimmy the Iceman McNeil's book, The Red and White Zamboni Ice Machine. To order a copy, you can email Jimmy at mac_iceman@hotmail.com. And we're going to put that on our website as well. So this week, the Breakaway Trivia question is, in honor of you, Kevin, who is the longest serving captain in Toronto Maple Leafs history? The answer when we come back.
Visit My Little Falls and stay connected with the latest news, information, and events in the city. Our mission is to generate interest in the community and connect residents in a more meaningful way by facilitating deeper conversations about how these stories will shape the future of Little Falls, New York. Join thousands of weekly visitors who stay up to date with feature stories, interviews, videos, and our events calendar. It's about timely local news for the community, keeping citizens informed about important issues, telling stories about the people who live and work here, and giving locally owned businesses the opportunity to reach a very targeted audience of local residents and tourists alike. It's a whole new form of media-rich content developed specifically for today's mobile lifestyle and listeners. You can download our iOS app in the iTunes store or sign up for our weekly newsletter. Stop by today at mylittlefalls.com. You'll be glad you did.
And we're back with segment 2 of Marty's Illegal Stick Hockey Hot Takes. And as we always do, we'll start segment 2 with the answer to our Breakaway Trivia question. And I'm going to go around the table here and ask everybody what their answer is. Kevin, I'm going to save you for last, as I'm sure you know the answer to this one. So anyways, the question was, who is the longest serving captain in Toronto Maple Leafs history? Gump, you think you might know it?
I think I got it. I think I finally, this is the first time I might get a winner.
You're 0 for 31.
So get a winner. I'm going to work on this. Because I used to love to watch the guy play hockey for Toronto Maple Leafs. Don't forget,
I saw him on his phone for a lot of
No.
Yeah. Well, you still got to figure out how to use it.
I watched a lot of Toronto Maple. I'm old, so I used to watch those old guys. Frank Mihalvic, hands down.
Okay, Barry?
I have no idea. I wish you could ask me something about minor league hockey. Oh, God. I have no idea. I'm not even going to try to guess.
Okay, Keith?
Daryl Sittler.
That was my second
That's
choice.
who I
That
was
was my
thinking.
second choice.
That's not a bad. He was captain twice, I think. But and Kevin, give us the answer.
George Armstrong.
And there it is, George Armstrong. I can't believe you just talked about him last month.
I did.
The Chief, yeah. I believe it was 1957 to 1969 he served as Leafs captain, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Kevin?
You know better than I off the top of your head. I just don't know. But it's something like that. But he goes back to the 1940s, late 1940s with the Leafs, right through, and later on was a scout for the team as well. So a long tenure with the Leafs, and a great captain, and indigenous background too, which plays into the world that we live in today as well.
Absolutely.
But what about Frank Mihalvic? Well, he was a captain too, wasn't he?
And he was obviously not as long as George Armstrong.
He was never a captain, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, Gump. Never a captain.
Oh, man.
But a great player.
But I like Frank Mihalvic. He was a good hockey player.
Well, you know what, though? Listen. I'm going to fill you up with all kinds of confidence because the Chicago Cubs won the World Series after, 108 years? You'll get one. Don't worry.
You know, son, I don't want to make you bleed in front of all your friends here.
Oh, boy. So let's start hot take, shall we? First of all, we want to start off our deepest and most sincere condolences go out to the family of David Pasternak after the loss of their infant son. What just a tragedy, you know? I mean,
terrible.
You know, as a parent, that rips your heart out. I mean, as a human being, it should rip your heart out, of course. But I mean, especially as a parent, it's just so sad to see. And you know, like I said, there's nothing more to say except our condolences to Pasta. That's hopefully, Godspeed and get well soon. Get past it. So, anyways, moving right along. Happy birthday to Theo Fleury, who turns 53 years old on June 29th, and Kirk McLean, who turned 55 years old on June 26th. What do those guys have in common, besides the fact that they're both Canadian?
They're both in their 50s.
All right. Well, you might have got a half point for.
God, I can't believe it.
They both play for the Rangers. They both play for the Rangers.
Oh, there we go.
I would have said Calgary.
He likes to embarrass me tonight, Donnie.
No, I mean, I'll tell you though, I always remember that celebration Theo Fleury had. What was that in the 91 playoffs? I think it was after against the Edmonton Oilers when he scored and he just slid it like 3/4 of the way across the ice. Never forget that. That was just awesome. So, anyways, happy birthday to those guys. Real quick, I just want to mention that the Buffalo Sabres no longer have an interim coach. They now have a permanent head coach in the form of Don Granato. I got to tell you guys, I think that's a great move on the Sabres' part. By the way, Dave, the sandbag save here is a Sabres fan. So
he forced me to choose a team.
That's right. So I just think this is a great move. Well liked by the players, by all accounts, and I think that Buffalo does have enough talent there to turn this around. It's going to take a little while, but I think Granato is going to be a real good choice to help do that. So good luck to Mr. Granato. So anyways, let's get into the news of the week. Commissioner Gary Bettman held a State of the League press conference on Monday. Among the topics covered were the Chicago Blackhawks sex abuse scandal, the return of the All-Star Weekend, which will be held in Vegas, the Winter Classic at Target Field in Minneapolis, the Stadium Series game in Nashville, a potential Heritage Classic game to be held in March, state of officiating, and the Tampa Bay Lightning salary cap situation, and the Olympics, among other things. Anything in particular stand out to you guys from that address?
What intrigued me? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, please don't mention Tampa Bay, but that's all.
Too late.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are quite bitter with the Lightning right now. But yeah, that's Kevin. What do you think?
Well, there's so many things to chew on there, but one that's really been curious to me is the whole Chicago Blackhawks situation. We're in an era now, hopefully a somewhat enlightened era now, but where these accusations are coming to the fore. And I have nothing to say here per se, but, you wonder, where has Jonathan Taves been all season? Is there any tie to to the scandal there, I know nothing. So please don't think that.
No, absolutely.
Giving you I pray and hope that it's not. It's really sad to hear these things happening. You know that they've been in the game a lot in the minor leagues, as you know, Barry, you may have read through the years as well, obviously, but you know, whether it be hazing situations or other situations. You mentioned Theo Fleury. Certainly he went through his situation, and what a tragic situation that was. You hate to hear these things, and especially when they creep into the game that we love, and a game that you think is so pristine in so many ways, and yet, you know, sometimes beneath the surface, it's not quite as pristine as you think it is. So that really is an intriguing one for me to watch the next little while.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, I mean, obviously there's still details that, you know, haven't been revealed or anything like that. So, I mean, obviously there is something there to it. I just, you know, me personally, I don't want to say too much about it until I, you know, hear more of exactly what happened. But that's got the makings of a major scandal here. And, you know, that's one of those deals. How it was kept under wraps for so long, I'll never know. But, I mean, it was. And now it's all finally coming to the forefront. So, you know, the ones you feel for are the victims in all this. And, you know, how it was basically just kept silent. But, you know, hopefully they'll be able to get this all straightened out. And, you know, the people who were in the wrong are brought to justice, really. Yep. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
But, you know,
was talking about the minor leagues. Junior hockey had a rough period back in the mid 80s, allegations, especially in the OHL and even out in the WHL, Western Hockey League. And luckily that was all taken care of. The people responsible, you know, they got them out of hockey, and you don't see that much anymore, thank God, in junior hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what kind of stood out to me out of this besides that was, for starters, they were asking the commissioner about the Olympics in the regular season. And he states that the regular season is going to start on time, mid-October, like it normally does. But they're waiting, releasing the schedule because they don't have it finalized because they don't know if they're going to the Olympics yet. Now, it was agreed upon with the players in the CBA that they would play in the 2022 Olympics. Given the current state of the world that everything's going on still with the virus and all that, nobody knows for sure if they're still going over. So from the way the commissioner he said it without saying it, they either have to make up their minds like in a week or two or forget about it because they got to get the schedule out for obvious reasons. You got so many logistics you have to deal with. So, I mean, I don't know, me personally, and this is kind of an unpopular opinion, but I don't think it would really hurt anything if they sat this Olympics out.
I have no problem
to be perfectly honest with you, just given everything that's going on, I mean, I guess better be safe than sorry, especially after everything we've just gone through to try to get back to normal. You know, and I understand that it's a huge honor for the players. I mean, I would be pretty perturbed if I was, you know, thought I was going to play in the Olympics, represent my country, because that's like one of the biggest things you can do in sports life. But again, given the circumstances going on, of course, this is way above my pay grade. So obviously I, you know, what I say doesn't really matter at all anyways, but that's just kind of a thought. The other thing too was there was a reporter that was going after him pretty bad about the officiating. And, you know, basically the commissioner said, yeah, they do make mistakes, but they're human. You know, the game is, you know, it's the fastest game in the world. And whether, you know, people like it or not, it's still a physical sport, and things are going to get missed. Now, granted, there were some really egregiously missed calls, egregious, but short of having just video refereeing all the time, I don't quite know how you remedy that situation. And to me, it almost seems like the refereeing was better when there was one referee. You know, sometimes, but you know, the game is, like I said, it's evolved and it's so much faster in the way. And I think personally, just in my opinion, that the game has almost been over-regulated to the point where everybody expects these huge penalties to be called on every egregious or every little tiny infraction. Everybody wants a penalty, but then everybody gets upset when the penalties get called. So it's a no-win situation.
There's no consistency, and that's been my biggest concern is
right.
From the beginning of the season to the playoffs, but also, you know, there was the commentators in the last couple of games have said things like, you know, it'll be dictated by what happens in the first little bit, and then, oh, okay, we see the referees are letting them play tonight, so the guys know how the game is being called. Well, it should be uniform. There should be some way to do it. Again, we're human. Yep. they're human. It's hard to do those sorts of things when we've got so much on the line for players, for franchises. You know, when you see a little hook, for example, that would have been called during the regular season, do you let it go? Some do, I guess, and some don't. Some of those checks, you're right, egregious is exactly the word, and yet right in front of a referee or an official, and nothing being called. And then other times, something that looks like a little ticky-tack play gets called at a really crucial time. So it's a weird game, and you can't win. The referees can't win. They're always going to be blamed for it one way or another, but there's got to be some consistency is the only thing I can suggest.
Oh, absolutely. And it's the same thing with suspensions, right? What would be a 2-game suspension in the regular season is maybe a 1 in the playoffs. You know, you either got to do it one way or do it the other. You can't try to do like a hybrid. Yeah. And that's where you run into all your problems. You're absolutely right, Kevin. That's, you know, you have to have some kind of consistency right across the board, good, bad, or otherwise, really. So, and again, that's way above my pay grade. So.
All of us, yeah.
Oh, and the last little news item I got here is the major NHL award winners were announced, and they are as follows: the Hart Trophy, Connor McDavid; Norris Trophy, Adam Fox; the Vezina Trophy, Marc-Andre Fleury; and the Calder Trophy, Kirill Kaprizov. Are there any surprises to you guys?
I'll step in again. I'm sorry if I'm
absolutely go right ahead.
Things. So I've been really impressed with Adam Fox, but I don't see him very often. In fact, I didn't see him at all this season, but I was delighted a guy in his second season won it. I was quite surprised, though, because Hedman has had such a strong season as well. Certainly has a heritage of being one of the best defensemen in the league, but I was really pleased to see some new blood there. Several years ago, I worked at the World Juniors, and I was the liaison with the Russian team, and Kaprizov was on the team at that time, and I got to know him. He's a quality guy. He didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Russian. Mikhail Sergachev from the Tampa Bay Lightning was the only guy who could help me other than Google Translate. But I just was really impressed with him as a person and certainly as a player as well. So, you know, just on a personal level, there were several ways you could go, but Kaprizov was a wonderful selection in my view for the Calder Trophy.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's no doubt that the year he had was just absolutely unbelievable. You know, I was actually kind of surprised, though, that Cal McCarr didn't get the Norris.
Right.
I was surprised by that. I mean, not saying that Adam Fox didn't deserve it. I'm not saying that at all. I just, in my mind, I thought it was going to be McCarr, especially given all the hype around McCarr coming into it right from the get-go. Really, I mean, there was this aura about this guy as soon as he came into the league, rightfully so, because he's a heck of a player. And especially with the success that Colorado had this year, I was very surprised at that. Were you surprised that Connor McDavid got all 100 first place votes?
I wasn't.
No,
I wasn't. Phenomenal player. What a phenomenal player, a generational player. Just amazing how for a team that, you know, that had its challenges through the course of not only this season, but the last several seasons, he can continue to dominate the way that he has. So I wasn't, but let's let some of the other boys talk about it as well.
Yeah.
I'm hogging all the time.
No, that's quite all right. Keith, what do you think?
But no, I wasn't surprised at all. I think that just like we said, I mean, on the team he plays, I mean, every year, you know, bottom line is you want to pay to watch him play.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Fan
I'll
or
tell
no.
you, you know, being an LA Kings fan, I have that NHL TV package so I can watch all their games. And even when the Kings aren't playing, if I see the Oilers are on, I'll watch the Oilers games to watch Connor McDavid.
Right.
And that's why it amazes me down here in the States that they don't have more Oilers games on the national broadcast. It blows my mind that they don't do that. I think last year they were on twice, maybe on NBC.
Really?
Twice.
Eh?
I mean, it wasn't that much. And here you got a guy that is just phenomenal. I mean, there is no more exciting player in the league than Connor McDavid. Let's be honest.
And then Draisaitl right there as well, who's also a Hart Trophy winner, an exciting player to watch. Two of the most exciting guys in the league. And yet, yeah, you're right. That's a good point, is that whether it's because of the team's fortunes or misfortunes, I'm not sure what it is, but you're right. You'd pay to watch Connor McDavid. The things that he can do at full speed are extraordinary. Magician.
Oh, it's incredible. It's just like watching a video game. Yeah. It really is.
Scott, what's your feelings about NBC losing the contract next year? Do you?
I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you what my feelings are. I think that the NHL going to ESPN and ABC and Turner is the best thing that could have happened for the sport.
Really? Oh, okay.
I think so, because they have such a platform between like ESPN with Sports Center and Turner Sports is just growing exponentially. I'm not dumping on NBC. I'm not doing that. But I mean, they're getting rid of NBCSN as a channel. They're going to all of their Peacock network, which is the online. And if you can have your sport front and center on a platform like ESPN, because right now they were kind of hockey was like on the back burner because they didn't have the rights. So why would they cover them a lot, right? But now with hockey being forefront on ESPN, it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge, and I think it's going to do a lot to take the game even further into the 21st century.
And to see that the analysts that they're hiring, the Gretzky's, the Messiers, it's just it's pretty astonishing.
Gretzky's going to be on Turner. You see there, ESPN got Chelios the other night. Yeah, it's going to be something. I tell you, it's going to be great, and I am looking very, very forward.
How about Pierre
Maguire? I don't think he was picked up. I'm just going to say that.
Thank God.
No, Pierre, I don't believe.
Okay.
But no, and just to wrap up with that, I mean, I think it's going to be a great thing for the sport. I really do. And it's going to be exciting. As long as they don't get any ideas like bringing back the glow puck. As long as we don't do that, we're good. So what we're going to do. Yeah, exactly. We're going to wrap this segment up like we always do with Website of the Week. Our Website of the Week is brought to you by 315hockey.com. 315hockey.com is your news hub for all levels of hockey in Central New York. This week's Website of the Week is kevinshayhockey.com. Everything you want to know about this week's guest, go to that website. I do believe you can order his books off that website as well. Or if not, go to Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, wherever popular books are sold, and you can find all of Kevin's books. And believe me, you will not be disappointed.
That's really nice. Thank you very much. And I don't know if I'm out of line here, but if you want to throw a couple of books into a prize barrel for your trivia answer or whatever, I'd be happy to donate a couple of books to you as well. Okay.
Oh, that would be amazing. Thank you very much. That would be awesome. Absolutely.
Why don't we do an autographed Derek Sanderson book and my most recent one called Voices in Blue and White, which is little snapshots of the passion that Leaf players past and present have for the team as well. So why don't we do one of each of those? Okay?
Absolutely. I very much so appreciate that. Thank you.
You may not see that autograph, Derek.
Well,
they may just disappear.
Trivia, so,
yeah.
You can mail it to 36 Church Street, Mohawk, New York. Because I'll never win one of these damn trivia things.
Scott, you better just let him know that who won, so that we all had a fair chance of winning.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
You're just saying,
every week. Hey, listen, I'll try to make it as fair as possible, okay?
Whatever you want to do.
Sure.
You want to do is fine by me.
All right.
But I will certainly take you up on that offer. I thank you very much. So what we're going to do is we're going to end now. We're going to go to a commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to take a ride on that Zamboni Time Machine.
Need to find that gift for someone special? Visit Little Falls Presents at the Stone Mill and Canal Place. Stop by today to find unique artist work, t-shirts, coffee cups, gift towels, greeting cards, tote bags, koozies, and original oil paintings and prints. It's all about the art of the gift. For more information, visit mylittlefalls.com/shop or call 315-508-5310 for details.
And we're back with segment 3 of Marty's Illegal Stick, the Zamboni Time Machine. The Zamboni Time Machine is brought to you by Zamboni.com, and the Zamboni name is used with permission from the Zamboni Company. This week, the Zamboni Time Machine takes us back to 1997, the year Carey Price started playing organized hockey. It is a common theme and basically a rite of passage for young hockey players to have to endure early morning practices and games because of demands for ice time at local hockey rinks. Some have to travel upwards of over an hour or even longer just to get to the rink. But Montreal Canadiens goaltender Carey Price might have the record when it comes to travel time for practice and to play youth hockey. Price, who is of Canadian First Nations descent, grew up in a remote village in northern British Columbia called Anaheim Lake. It was a very small village with no indoor ice rink, so Price learned how to skate and play on frozen creeks and ponds. His father's name was Jerry, and he himself was a goaltender. Jerry was even drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers in 1978, although he would never play for the team. By the time young Carey was 10, Jerry and his family decided it was time to sign Carey up for youth hockey in Williams Lake. Although Williams Lake had a coveted indoor ice rink, it was also over 200 miles away from Anaheim Lake. This meant at least a 3, if not 4-hour drive one way, depending on the weather, 3 times a week for practices and games, some of which were, you guessed it, at 6 o'clock in the morning. The Price family did have one advantage, however, as they owned a small plane and Jerry had his pilot's license. According to Wayne Gretzky's book, 99 Stories of the Game, if the weather was good and there was enough daylight, Jerry would get the plane airborne and leveled and let 10-year-old Carey Price take over the controls. The long trips obviously paid off, as Carey Price is now one of the top goaltenders in the entire NHL. He is now in the Stanley Cup final, playing to win his very first Stanley Cup ring, but it wouldn't have happened if it were not for the countless hours of travel and dedication that go to the game that he and tens of thousands of other hockey players have gone through. Although I'm sure only a handful of them got to fly to their practices as a 10-year-old. And that, my friends, concludes this week's trip on the Zamboni Time Machine. Now, usually we try to come up with these crazy, zany stories about hockey for these, but I figured let's go a little inspirational route this week. So I read that one. I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. So I paraphrased it and presented it for you guys as the Zamboni Time Machine. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Great story. Great story. Great goaltender, too.
Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. He really is. But, and I wish him the best of luck, even though that's a tall order beating the Tampa Bay Lightning this year. But we'll see what happens. Did you know the Canadians have lost game 1 in their last 4 Stanley Cup wins?
I didn't know.
It is Montreal.
Yeah.
I'm not a Tampa Bay fan.
Stop now while you're behind.
Just stop while you're behind. That's awesome. Careful, he's gonna rip one past your ear pretty soon.
Yeah.
We'll be dropping the gloves here too.
Kevin, blood flows everywhere in this room afterwards.
I love it. I want
This
to
is
step
a rough
away
show.
from this Brendan Gallagher like all over.
Yeah, right.
You may wonder why I have indoor-outdoor carpet here.
And a roll of foil available too.
Yeah.
There's ice under here.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, well, we're going to wrap up. Kevin, like I said, I want to thank you again for coming on. This has just been fantastic. Such a treat for us. And
Really?
You are welcome back anytime at all, my friend. Anytime.
Well, it's been so fun chatting with you guys. You make it so fun. And Scott, you're a great host, and all of our affiliates here just had so much fun. Barry, you and I've been friends for a while, but here's our first chance to really interact this way. Thank you for all of your kindnesses through the years. I've got some lovely pucks that Barry has sent me that are adorning my my office now too. But this has been so much fun. Love the name, love the show, and I've really enjoyed being with all of you guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate it.
Kevin.
All right, so that'll do it for us this week. So I want to thank Kevin Shea one last time for coming on, for Leo Gump Kinville, for Dave the Sandbag Warner.
No, don't do that.
For the Doctor of Hockey, Keith Levatino, for Barry from the Rink of Dreams, Shelley. I'm Scott Kimball, and I want to let you know that you can find us on YouTube and on all major podcast platforms under the My Little Falls banner. We're on Facebook and Twitter at Marty's Illegal Stick Hockey Podcast, and of course at martysillegalstick.com. That's all we got for this week's folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.